Hi, and welcome to this live stream on incorporating systems thinking and specifically into your Agile adoption. Hi, I'm Joshua Barnes, and I'm joined by my partner, Al Shalloway in Success Mentors University. And we are starting with this live stream a new weekly short discussion series. And these are intended to be a very short, less than 10-minute discussion on a topic that Al is going to be going into a lot more depth. He's got a new series of free weekly webinars for the Amplio community of practice. I'm going to put a link into the chat in just a minute so you can see how to register for these. So what Al's going to be doing is on every Wednesday, he is going to have a topic for a 1-hour webinar where he's going to go into more depth. We'll do a little mini version of that 2 days prior, which will be on Mondays. His webinars are going to be starting usually around 8 a.m. Pacific time. So to get things going today, Al, you and I have discussed 3 of the key pieces of systems thinking. And how about you get us rolling today on the topic and share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joshua. Well, first, let me give a little background as to why I started this off with systems thinking. A couple of weeks ago, I was thinking, what are the things that in, I guess now about 24 years of doing some level of consulting in Agile, and what are the things that have been missing? Since 2005 in particular, I've been looking to see what experts do that's successful and kind of maybe what a little less than experts do that isn't successful. And I've compiled about actually 30 things that I consider to be reasonably essential and mostly lacking in the Agile space. Now, there are spots where it's used, like Wolfram Mueller, Steve Tendon, Peter Merrill, Mike Burrows. I mean, we actually have been jokingly call ourselves the rebel scum after Peter kind of created that meme from Star Wars. And we have a lot of this, but outside of that, there are a lot of others, individuals who do. Most of the frameworks don't, and that's unfortunate. So in the Amplio community practice, which is a free a series I have where I resurrected these webinars. I'm picking like the top dozen or so to do a session on to illustrate. And I think systems thinking is one of the most foundational things. So let me just jump into that. If you go to the link that Joshua gives you, that'll get you to the Amplio community practice, and then you can decide to register for the seminar without registering for the ACOP. That'll get you in, but it won't get you a recording for a bit later. We have high priority. You get the recording in the ACOP the next day, but making it public takes some time, a few weeks probably. Anyway, the 3 characteristics of systems thinking, and this has been around a long time. Kind of the classic book is Peter Senge's The Fifth Discipline, which is, I don't know, 30 years, 33 years old or something. That's not, I'd actually been introduced to it before Senge's work, but that's kind of where I really got into it in depth. Anyway, there are 3 main characteristics. I mean, there's more. Systems thinking is very in depth, but I'm just going to touch on 3 points. One is that systems are about the relationships between the components, not the components themselves. This means if you're looking at a development system, you've got to look at the different pieces of the people working, like development, product management, ops, things like that. We've seen this a lot being absorbed in DevOps. That's saying, hey, let's look at these 2 pieces not separately, but together. And this means you actually also must take a view that if you change something, it might cause other things to change in a way you hadn't thought about, because these relationships are sometimes complex. You don't see them well. And sometimes they're coupled. So you change one, it changes another. And sometimes the change in one might cause a non-linear event, meaning a really big change in something else. So you got to be aware about these relationships can be quite different. Another aspect of systems thinking is that the system itself, now by the system, I mean the whole thing, the people, what they're trying to work on, management, the environment they're in. Most of the errors are actually caused by this. It's not the people. Edwards Deming said that something like 96% of the errors were what he called common cause errors, that they were being caused not by individuals, but by more the environment, the way people were working, the environment within which they were working, how their understanding of things were. So when you recognize that most of the errors are due to the system, even though if you look around, you'll see most of the people immediately blame other people. Look at LinkedIn. You'll see Oh, they weren't motivated. Oh, they weren't doing this. Oh, they weren't doing that. Most of the conversations about failed frameworks and approaches is about the people didn't do a good job, instead of, well, maybe we ought to look at how the system's defined. Now, it's not always the system either, and it could be the interaction. Again, remember the relationships. So a lot of times things are misunderstood. You might have a system, rather an approach, and people misunderstand it, but that relationship of how things are misunderstood, that's part of the system. This is called de facto instead of de jure. Yogi Berra and a million other people said, in theory and practice are the same, but in practice, they're different. See, I'm more interested in the practice. That's what systems thinking tells us. The third thing is systems say you got to look at the whole. You can't look at individual things. This is one of the reasons people have problems with scaling, is because you might take a team and you might take another team, but the way teams work inside the team is different than the way teams work outside. It's kind of like I hear a lot of times Scrum's fractal, and I'm not sure. It's fractal in structure, physical. Like you look at you look at atoms, molecules, proteins or whatever, cells, and beings, and then you could keep going up where the space between things gets bigger and bigger. Look at planets, solar systems, in the galaxies to galaxies. You might have a fractal structure there, but the behavior is different. Same way, intra-team dynamics within the team. Third try. It's hard. When you only got two things, you got to get it right eventually. Intra-team dynamics within the team is different than inter-team dynamics. So we have to pay attention to it. By the way, I didn't say, oh, SAFE's a better approach looking at everything. We tend to do this in the Agile space. We go from one extreme to the other. There is a middle one, but I'm not going to get into that right here. But it would show that you have to look at the pieces, the relationships. You've got to have something else. Next week, we'll actually be talking about that with a panel discussion. And actually, when the presentations are on Wednesday, they'll pretty much always be 8. Every now and then I'll have one that's on Friday or some other day because of other people involved, which will be next week's session, Friday in the morning. And that'll be listed on our website. So because we have actually, I'm very excited about this. I wanted to talk about value streams, but I got some other people to come in because they wanted to talk about it. Anyway, the way to find out more is go to the Amplia community practice. I think that was put in the chat, or Josh will make it available.
It is. It's posted a few times in there now.
So if you go in there, you'll see more about the ACOP. It's free. You'll see topics I'm going to be doing in the next few weeks. I might change it 2 or 3 weeks out, but the next 2 are definitely done. And if you want to join the ACOP, that's a great place to come to live sessions. That enables you to come to a couple other things, and you'll get these recordings much faster because I just put them out basically on a link to them. And I eventually have my webmaster kind of make nice things we put out on YouTube, but with the backlog we have, that might be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks later. So anyway, I'm done with a quick overview. I think we have a couple minutes for questions.
We do. And so one of the things, just to kind of tie it back into also from an Agile adoption perspective. So a lot of times we see a focus on a team, right? We have a pilot, or we have a number of teams that have been identified, and then we kind of expand out to other teams. So just a little bit on taking a systems thinking approach to how we would be more focused on improving the environment and the things that are causing us maybe the most friction, the most delays from a transformation perspective. A lot of times that just does not get included in these Agile transformations that still are occurring today. So anything, Al, on that you want to share?
I'm sorry. I was trying to get into the chat. My brain.
Yeah.
Say that again real fast. I got most of it.
Yeah. So just a little bit on systems thinking with respect to Agile transformations and what you might go into a little bit more depth on your Wednesday webinar.
Yeah. Well, the main thing will be that when most people are taking a transformation where they have a predefined solution, like, oh, we're gonna, like look at SAFe and Scrum. They take opposite approaches, but they both have this solution you bring and apply. And the difficulty with that, systems are so complex and so involved, it's unlikely that that's going to actually give you what you need. Now you can make it work and you can adjust to it. And you might want to start with it because it's at least predefined, but then recognize that you've got to look at the interactions. And one of the biggest ones is, where is the problem? So I didn't say this, but when I talk about you have to look at the whole, maybe where the problem is where it's showing up isn't what's causing it. I wrote an article actually a long time ago called using Lean's 5 value streams and Lean's 5 Whys. And in a situation, this was back in 2006, the product manager, the manager, the project managers, and the manager of the development team came, the 100-person development group, because the developers are having troubles with quality and they were losing a lot of time by having to rework and just the delays that were injected. And when we did a high-level value stream map that took an hour, they realized that the problem wasn't where they thought it was. That was where the problem was early on in sales, of all things, and it was causing developers problems because things weren't being done that were supposed to be done. And literally in an hour of mapping and an hour going back to their own company and talking to sales, they fixed a problem that saved them 20% of their development time. Literally 100 people, 20% done in 2 hours. So if you're trying to solve the wrong problem in the wrong way, that's a real issue. And this happens because people tend to think where the problem is showing up is in fact where the problem is. And then the question is, a lot of times, an example, by the way, sometimes people will talk about management being the problem, not engaged, but you got to ask why. So this is the whole thing of systems cause most of the problem. Maybe management's not as bad as a lot of people talk about. Maybe it's because of the way the whole Agile transformation has been presented to them and their own past. So it's a very complex situation, and that's another topic we'll talk about, how to deal with complexity, because to be candid, I think there's another way than what's commonly done. Anyways, there's a second one. Sorry, and I'll pay more attention.
Yeah, there is. So we're a little over our 10-minute time period, but so Curtis Hibbs has an excellent question that he has put in, and I had challenged Curtis to put something in to see if he could, draw something out of your experience and knowledge. So,
well, here's the thing. No, that's great, because there is another view here. One of the things I've seen that's required when you come from a team up process is you have to coordinate the teams. For years, there was scrum of scrums, and we saw that we could not get that to work. And Guy Beaver and I and Jim Trott actually included in our book something we did find working, which was what we call the product coordination team, which is now kind of a scrum of product owners. And in 2006, we had come up with shared backlogs, which I created, kind of what we call BLAST, the basic lean agile solution team, kind of a precursor to Nexus and Scrum at scale. I don't think they copied me, but they knew what I was doing. At least I know Jeff did. But the point is, what made BLAST work, it didn't require coordination as much as it enabled alignment. So when you have teams doing good work individually, but are working across purposes, you don't have alignment. Because if you had alignment, they would be working together. And usually the reason you don't have alignment is there's no holistic view of what's being built. This brings up another issue I'll be talking about in a few weeks: minimum business increments. How do you know what you're working on that might cut across multiple teams, not just the sprint goals?
excellent. All right. So thank you all for attending live. And if you are watching this on replay as well. And again, there's links to how to register and get access to the free webinar that'll go into a lot more depth on Wednesday, as well as the whole series that we'll be doing. Thanks again, Al. It's always a pleasure. And we'll see everyone on next Monday's 10-minute mini discussion.
Thank you then. Thanks.